Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I've got a returning guest. It's the one and only Joshua Williamson. How you doing, brother?
Hello again. I'm good. I'm good. How you doing?
I'm very well, mate. Always very well. And the last time you were on, we were talking about your epic new Green Arrow book, your ongoing Green Arrow series from DC, and we're a couple of issues in to your epic, all new ongoing Superman series. So, mate, before you get into some of the developments that are going on in your world of Superman, how did you get into creating the book?
Yeah, well, when we were working on Dark Crisis, we were having a conversation about what I was going to do next. We had some different ideas, and I knew a couple books here and there I wanted to do. And then one of the editors at DC, he came to me and he was like, "Do you want to do Superman?" And at first, I was really, I wasn't sure, because I was like, I mean, to me, Superman is like the superhero, right? Like, Superman is DC Comics, and so first I was a little nervous about it. First, I was like, I don't know, but I had this Daily Planet notebook, and the Daily Planet notebook is just like full of Superman ideas that I've been thinking about for years, and I had kept it in case there was ever, I was ever going to do a Superman story, and I wasn't sure at first, to be totally honest. But I was like, wait, I have all these ideas. I have this story I want to tell with Superman, and I definitely love Superman. So I went to the editor and I was like, well, okay, here's what we're gonna do. And he actually had moved up here to Portland, so we went out, we had lunch, and I was like, all right, here's my entire crazy idea, like, and this is what I want to do, and I lay it all out for him. And he was like, I want to do that. That sounds cool. It sounds something different. And so we started working on it, and I took a lot of time just working out of my notebook, writing stuff up and building it out. And then he brought up Jamal Campbell as the artist, who was like the perfect choice. That guy is awesome. He's a genius. And so we really just, started putting these ideas together, man. Like, I mean, that's really what it was. It was like they came in and they said, "Do you want to do it?" And, one of the things I wanted to make sure we did, because at the time, Philip was writing action. Philip Kennedy Johnson was writing Action Comics, and Tom Taylor was doing the John Kent book. And I was like, I really like what those guys are doing, so I don't want to like destroy what they're doing. Can we start all talking together and start building something together? And so I started meeting those guys. Like, I met Philip at MegaCon a year ago. I met Tom at San Diego Comic-Con last year. And we started just talking about what we were going to be doing and how we would do it. And that's what came to Action 1050. We sort of just talked out some different ideas for it. But yeah, it was just really kind of, the editor asked me, and I eventually said yes. At the time, I was so in Dark Crisis that I was like, oh my God, I can't
Yeah.
think about anything else. But yeah, once we started going, then it was like, okay, cool, this is really fun. And I knew what I wanted to do with Superman, and I think it made sense for me to be doing Superman after Dark Crisis. And I was nervous about it. I felt probably I don't normally get intimidated by books, like Dark Crisis. I wasn't intimidated really. Most of the books I know I'm gonna have fun with it. Superman's probably the first DC book that I was like, oh my God, I feel a little intimidated by this one. It's like I have to land it, and it's like, because there's been so many great Superman stories, so many great Superman comic books, and he's one of my favorite characters. So I was just like, all right, this one, it was probably the first one I felt intimidated by. So it took me a minute to kind of get into it, but it was like I put more pressure on myself probably for Superman than anything else I've ever worked on for DC, and
I
and then
mean,
it all came together, and yeah, I got the I
I
got the first
believe
two
that.
issues.
I mean,
Yeah.
the thing about Superman, right? He's not just the DC archetype. He's not just
Uh-huh.
the comic book archetype. He's an
Yeah.
entertainment archetype. I mean, in terms of
Yeah.
fictional characters, I mean, the same goes for Batman, of course, but fictional
Yeah.
characters throughout human history, there are few characters more iconic and few visuals more iconic than
Yeah.
Superman and the Superman S, right? Do you know what I mean? That carries a lot of
Yeah.
weight.
Well, it was, it actually, because I felt that intimidation and that pressure, it made me look at why I didn't feel that way about Batman. Like, anytime I work on Batman, I don't feel that way. And I think because with Batman, Grant Morrison said this thing where it was like you could take Batman and put Batman in any kind of story. Like, he's a vehicle for any kind of story you want to do. And I was thinking about that with Batman, where I think with Batman you could do a little bit more with him. There's a little more flexibility. But then I took a step back and I'm like, you can do that with Superman too. Like, I think you can do any kind of story with Superman. And then it was like, I'm gonna do every kind of story with him. And that's really what, and then I started looking at these things and being like, for example, it's like, why does Batman get to have all the different kinds of toys? Why does Batman get to have all the different kinds of sets and all the different kind of costumes? Like, Batman's the kind of character that for different missions they have different costumes. And so for
Yeah, right.
Superman, I was like, why can't Superman have that? Like, why can't I do that? yeah, so I started thinking about that, and that really opened up Superman to me. That was part of the
Yeah.
whole thing of like, okay, well, how am I going to get there? And then also, I had a point of view character because it's like again with these characters, and Superman is so incredibly human. But then I started thinking a lot about Lex Luthor and Lois and Jimmy, and like once I knew we were going to be doing stuff where we were putting the secret identity back, once I knew that, it really helped out. Like I was able to kind of uh I don't know. One of the things the editor said to me when I started working on it, he was like, one of our goals is to get every toy on the table. So every toy on the table. So that's Mom, Pa, that's Secret Identity, that's Daily Planet, everything on the table, and then go from there. And I was like, okay, great. And then, but knowing I had that relationship with Lois, I had this stuff with Jimmy, and then of course Lex Luthor. And Lex Luthor essentially is like the co-star of the book for me. I mean, those are the three main
Yeah.
supporting characters. Those three, and there's a few others that'll come in and out. Um, we're just introducing some new villains and some new heroes, but like those three are very key, and particularly Lex Luthor, because the book is going to be about that relationship between Superman and Lex, and the sort of the conflict between the two of them, and how I think there is a world where they could have been friends, and they could have, they could have done something special, but Lex's ego is so out of control, it can never happen. So all these pieces and stuff, it all just kind of built to the book. But I had Lex being his view of Superman actually became kind of a good like voice for the book in a
Yeah.
way, right? Because like in the first issue, part of the story is that Lex is kind of, he's kind of narrating it in a way, because what you find out is that Superman finds this out or knows this. It's like Superman always has an ear out on certain people, right? Like he keeps an ear on Mom and Pop Kent, he keeps an ear on John, he keeps an ear on Lois, keeps an ear on Bruce, but he also keeps an ear on Lex because he knows Lex is always up to something. Once Lex figured that out, he knows that Superman is always listening to him. He was like, oh, well, I'm just going to start shit talking him. Like, I'm going to start, you know, I'm going to mess with him. But at the same time, he's going to start criticizing him.
Yeah.
He's going to start saying, like, not just you suck, but like, you could be better at this. Like, look at this. Oh, you're wasting your time. Like why can't you be a better Superman? And I think that's where Lex is kind of coming from, where he's like, at this point, Lex believes the world needs Superman. It's just a reality. And so he's like, well, if the world's going to have Superman, they're going to have my version of Superman. Like, I'm going to make him the best Superman he can be. And so he's like, I'm going to manipulate him to becoming what I think is the best version of him. And so that's a major piece of the book. And yeah, man, it's been really fun. Like once I figured that out too, like that dynamic between Clark and Lex, and I knew that was going to be a major part of the book, it all just really came together.
I mean, that sounds like you've had a massive amount of fun thinking that through and putting yourself
Yeah,
inside those
yeah.
characters.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And then having Clark be this person who is like, well, because part of it is like, Clark believes the best in everybody, right? Like he
Yeah.
has this faith in humanity, and he sees people and he's like, I know that you can be the best version of yourself. Can he say that about Lex? Can he look at Lex and say the same thing? And that's the first issue. He says this to Lois, where he's like, I feel like I gave up on Lex. He's the only person I ever gave up on is Lex. And Lois is like, no, Lex gave up on Lex. But it's like for Superman to see, can he, like Superman can almost save everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a great Garth Ennis story about when, in Hitman, where Superman is
Yeah.
like, there's one person you can't save, that astronaut. It's one of the best Superman comics ever.
Yeah.
And but in this moment where he looks at, can you look at Lex and say, can I save this person? Can I make Lex, can I help Lex redeem himself? Like if Lex is saying, listen, I'm going to try to redeem myself, can Superman believe him and actually help him? Knowing, there's a scene in the book where Lois says this, where she's like, Clark is basically saying Lex is playing games, and Lois is like, yeah, but that's how you win. Like you got to play. Like you're only gonna find out what the game is if you go play. And Clark's like, oh, he's like, I only like games that have like a bat and a ball. Like I don't want to play these games. But Lois is like, no, you gotta play it. You got to see what he's really up to, and that's it. Like if he's telling the truth, the only way you're gonna find out he's telling the truth is if you play along. Or if he's up to something else. And we revealed in the first issue, like one of the twists in the first issue was that you find out that like Lex had been in Metropolis for a long time before Clark, and he made a lot of enemies in that time period, but he put all those enemies down, and all those enemies are coming back. So it's kind of like, how you have the Superman Revenge Squad?
Yeah. Right.
In this, we have the Lex Luthor Revenge Squad. So you have all these people from the past that are basically coming back that obviously don't like Lex Luthor, and they want to take him down. They want to kill him, and worse, they want to destroy him. And Superman's kind of caught in the middle of that fight. Um, and so yeah, but that's funny because you would think like if anybody has reason for revenge on Lex, it's probably Clark. So like they're like, why don't you join us? Come with us. Obviously, Clark's like, no, but it's just a lot of fun stuff that we're doing with it. And I'm trying to explore some things I haven't seen before. Like that time period with Lex before Clark came to trouble. Because Lex left Smallville long before Clark did, and then Clark was traveling the world for like 10 years before he landed back in Metropolis. He came back as an adult. Lex was in Metropolis that whole time.
Yeah.
It's like that's a story there. There's something because I always wonder about Superman. I'm always like, there's that 10-year gap, and some people have filled it in here and there. There's a couple little stories here and there of what happened when he was traveling the world. But I was like, what about Lex? Lex was just chilling in Metropolis for 10 years. Let's do a story about that. So that's part of it, is like, what was going on with Lex in that time period. But I say all this stuff, but a big part of the book is I don't. I know I definitely embrace continuity when I'm doing the books I'm doing, but I'm trying to do not less of that. I'm trying to honor that, but really keep that ball moving forward. And that meant introducing new villains or taking the current villains and like amping them up. Like we amp up Parasite a little bit, we amp up Livewire, and there's some more that we're doing down the line. And there's a story reason for it to happen. It isn't just like these characters show up with new powers. That's not. I didn't want to do that. But it is all part of a bigger story that I'm doing, and I hope I'm on the book for a while because I definitely have a lot of ideas for it. I've been talking with the editors about some plans for next year, and I'm actually going to see Philip this week and talk to him about some stuff that we text each other at night about things. But it's always good to actually sit down and be like, "Here's what I'm doing. What are you doing? Let's build together." But yeah, man, I really love writing it. It is definitely the hardest book I've ever written for DC.
Okay, yeah.
It's weird. I have this thing. I learned writing this, and it sounds really silly, but I've learned that like it's really easy to get Superman right, and it's really easy to get Superman wrong.
Yeah.
Like I know that sounds silly. It's like obvious,
No, but I get it completely. This is one of the things I was going to ask you about exactly.
Oh yeah, this question.
Yeah. Because please continue because it's such an interesting topic. I think.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think I'm not going to bring up anybody in particular or anything like that, but you can see places where people have gotten off track.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and it's like it makes you realize how easy it is to do that when you're actually in it. Like you're like, oh yeah, like I know the stuff that I love about Superman, and when I was working on issue 1 particularly, it was like here are the things I want to see in a Superman book, personal, right? Like I love the character, make sure I see these things. And I think if you hit those things, those familiar beats, people will accept it, and I'll accept it. But then you also have to you have to move that ball forward. You have to do something new with it. You can't play the greatest hits. You can't go backwards.
Yeah.
You gotta do something new with it, right? But then you can see how much you have to walk that line, because if you trip and you fall, man, you can fall hard. And suddenly people are like, this book doesn't feel like a Superman book anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it is for me is like to make sure it always feels like Superman. And no matter what changes I make or crazy stories I do, it has to feel like a Superman comic book. And so that's where my head is with that one. Like it's been interesting. It's still the hardest book I write, but at the same time, I'm like my North Star is making sure that me and Jamal have fun when working on it. Like I'm doing stuff that I think would be really fun. Like if I turn the last page or I turn a page and I go, oh man, that's cool. Like that's there's stuff like that we're doing that I feel like if I'm smiling while I'm working on it, or I know someone's gonna smile reading it. Like there's a scene in issue 5 with Superman and Jimmy that I was struggling with, and then I realized what the solution was, and I wrote the solution, and then I was like, man, this page turn with it says something happens. I'm not gonna say what it is right now, but it's too spoiler. It's too soon, but it made me smile, and I'm like, that's fun to me, and I think that's what you want from this book is you want to have it be fun.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I mean, it's always struck me as a lifelong Superman reader, something that I think. I mean, Superman has undoubtedly defeated some of the greatest writers in the comic book business, and I won't name who they are, but we know who they are. There's some people who are legends in the business, they're amazing, but their body work's fantastic, but the work they did in Superman is kind of subpar. And it seemed to me, purely as a well-read fan, that one of the keys to getting Superman right is getting Clark Kent right. And I'm always surprised
Oh
that
yeah.
more writers don't get Clark Kent right, because the really interesting thing about Superman, of course, is that he is a writer. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He's absolutely,
Yeah.
he's a journalist. You know, and
Yeah.
and,
That's why in
and
the you have to treat him like a human person.
yeah,
Like I think people, I don't know if they see him as an alien or they see him as. I find this is something I dealt with in Flash too, where it was like, you know, people put Barry Allen on a pedestal. Like he was that we've talked before. Like he was the character who died. He was the
yeah,
martyr. So he's one of the greatest superheroes of all time. And like, how do you live with that once you know that? Like people consider you the savior of a multiverse. You know, like and how do you live with that? Like that was a big part, and that's part of why I would always make Barry make mistakes because I was trying to humanize him, you know. Um, and with Clark, like that's why in the first issue I had it where he listens to music when he's working. You know, he when he's typing, he has music he plays, and he has stuff music that he likes because I was like, let's continue to give this person human things, you know, because I think we treat him too much like an alien, and that was my big approach to him is really to make him as human as possible. Like this is a dude who's just like at the end of the day, what Clark really wants to do is to hang out with his wife and his friends and his children. You know, he wants to, you know, I don't think that, oh, but here's the big one. This was the biggest thing with Clark that I really went into when I was looking at it. I do not believe that Clark feels burdened in any way by being Superman. Like, I don't think in any way, because I think that that's one of the biggest things with him. And people try to write him like he's like the weight of the world is on his shoulders, and oh God, he has to save people's lives, and oh, it's like no, this is a person who literally enjoys being a superhero. Like he likes it, he likes helping people. It is not a struggle in any way, shape, or form for him. There is zero burden on him on helping people. And so once I started approaching him with that, like, don't get me wrong, I was gonna say like he wants to spend time with them, but he also has this other thing that he likes doing, and that's helping people. You
yeah.
know, he wants to go out and help people. Once I started really approaching it from that and trying to find ways of just making him this, you know, human person, you know, and just explore those avenues with him. Like there's a scene in issue 3 where he's just like just dancing with Lois, you know? It's just simple. You know, when you go back and you look at the original Superman movie and you look at all the like the ways they humanize him. But it's like, man, there is a long section of that movie where it is just him and Lois flying, and it is a musical.
Yeah, right
You
on.
know, people
Yeah,
forget that because remember she was supposed to sing it, and then she was like, "I
yeah.
can't sing."
I can't sing.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah. So they had like there is like a spoken word section of that movie,
yeah.
like it is just a very humanizing
Well,
thing for
it's
him,
an
you know?
amazing piece of
Yeah,
ballet and poetry and music at the same time,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
so interesting because the what's great about the scene is that it works so well because
yeah.
nobody came out of that movie when they first saw it going, man, that section was a bit out there, wasn't it? When they went flying around, everybody just bought it, you
No,
know.
totally fit, totally fit. It made sense. I don't know who said this. I feel like I've heard this from different creators. And this is actually something that I looked into it, and I so years ago. I'll tell you one of the first times I heard this. So I'm gonna name drop a bunch right now. So Tom King and I one time we were in the we were at the Bayfront Hilton. We are walking to the Bayfront Hilton. I don't know where we were going. It was like nighttime. I think we were like calling it quits for the day or something like that.
Yeah,
And as we're leaving, we run into Frank Miller, and we just ran into Frank Miller, and it was right when Superman Year One was coming out with Ramita. It was around that time. I don't think it actually started coming out. But we all started talking. There was somebody else there, but it was like the three of us. You know, we're just chatting. And Frank is like, you know, people think I hate Superman because of Dark Knight, but he's like, I love Superman. It's my favorite characters. And he was like, this is the thing that people forget about Superman. He was like, Superman is a romance. Like, it is a romance comic. It is a romance story. And both Tom and I were like, you know, like, yeah, he's right. You know, it is. And then we're leaving that conversation thinking about that. And when Frank was talking about the time, he was talking about the romance with Superman and Lois. It's like the love triangle, right? Um, but it was also about Superman's love of humanity and his love of helping people, right? Like it's about that too. And I started thinking about Superman's relationship to Metropolis, to the world, to the people around him. And that is where I started coming around a lot of the stuff that I was working on because I was like, it is this is essentially a romance. Like it is, it's his relationship with humanity, his relationship with the Daily Planet, with Lois, but also his friendships. It was like, oh, his friendship with Jimmy, his friendship, you know, with Bruce, and you know, his relationship with his son, and it was like all of these things. And then it clicked. That's where the Lex part clicked, because I was like, oh, and it's also about this weird antagonistic, not weird. They have a crazy history. These are two people who grew up in the same small town. They probably should be friends, and it never happened. And so that all these things sort of came around to that.
Yeah, mate, I think that is beautifully said, and I think it's also a great point at which to park our conversation. I tell you what, mate, I could spend 2 hours of these episodes just listening to you talking about DC characters and anybody paying.
Well, I'm going to see you in a few. I'm going to see you soon. We're going to be in San Diego together.
San Diego, and I will very much look forward to it. And if anybody has been watching this, wants to take away one of the great not comic book, pop culture quiz question answers, it is, who is the most famous fictional writer of all time? The answer is Superman. 100%.
Oh yeah,
yeah. There can be no doubt.
Yeah, for sure.
No, it's a fact. But you're doing great.
Well, he also wrote those science novels. Don't forget, he wrote those science novels.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. So,
and he's got his he's got his secret agent books as well, right? You know what I mean?
yeah. Those books, dude. Oh my god. Anyway, yeah.
Anyway,
that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. So anybody watching this, you can order the first 3 issues of Superman and Beyond, including an excellent second printing cover of issue 1. So congratulations on going to reprint on the book.
Thank you. Yeah.
You can order all of that from the links attached to this conversation. And Josh, mate, it's always a blast talking to you, brother.
Yeah, it's always fun. Yeah, it's always good talking to you.
Take care. See you soon, mate.
All right. You too. Thank you.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.